Voters of Winchester. Welcome to our Hot Topic and Educational Forum on Retiree Healthcare Benefits. Taxpayers have long understood government pension liabilities and the impact on local budgets, but government obligations for other post-employment benefit provided to employees, namely retiree health insurance, have only recently started to receive similar attention. As part of the effort to fund these obligations, in November 2012, the Winchester Board of Selectmen voted to increase co-pays and deductibles for already retired employees in 2013, and then, as of July 1st, 2014, decrease the town's contribution to premium costs for already retired employees as well. And that is the topic of today's forum. My name is Marilyn Mullane, co-chair of this event with Rosemary Pye. We are both members of the Winchester League and its steering committee. Before we begin the forum, just a few words about the League of Women Voters. The League is a nonpartisan organization and accordingly does not endorse political candidates nor parties. You are probably familiar with our candidate forum events, of which there have been 3 this year. You may not be as familiar with our activities that support informed participation in government and increased public understanding of major policy issues. Through education and advocacy, the League also seeks to influence public policy. While the League can take positions on local issues, it can only do so after study and membership consensus. Accordingly, today's forum is all about education and not advocacy. Before I introduce our League moderator, I will briefly explain today's format and ground rules. There will be no questions from the floor. Questions were solicited from the public, screened by a League subgroup, and provided to all panelists last Friday. All panelists may make opening remarks. The order of opening remarks is 15 minutes total for all 3 town officials, 15 minutes total for the 3 retiree representatives, and then 5 minutes for each of the 2 Massachusetts municipal organizations. After opening remarks, we will go into a 45-minute Q&A period. Questions will allow for a 2-minute timed response, and our moderator may ask follow-up questions. The order for closing remarks is as follows: 5 minutes total for town officials, 5 minutes total for retiree representative, and then 5 minutes for each Massachusetts municipal organization. Please note that the town officials and the retiree representatives decided themselves on the distribution of their total time for both opening and closing remarks. We are very fortunate to have June Michaels, an expert in fiscal policy matters, as our skilled League moderator today. June has been the fiscal policy specialist for the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts since 2008 and is currently co-president of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann. June also served a 1-year term as president of the statewide Mass Association of Town Finance Committees, which is a branch of the Mass Municipal Organization and represents all the municipalities which have the town meeting form of government. And in her spare time, she served on the Town of Rockport's Finance Committee for 20 years, 6 of them as chair. June is therefore very familiar with our structure of town government. Please welcome Ms. Michaels.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. It's been a pleasure working with Rosemary and Marilyn in putting the forum together. We will start with a 15-minute presentation by the town officials: Selectman Forrest Fontana, Finance Committee member Patty Cluley, and Town Manager Richard Howard.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the League for putting on the event. It's a very important one for not only taxpayers in the town officials, but certainly for the retirees and active employees as well. We won't take up, or I won't take up 15 minutes in this introduction, I hope, but I do want to lead you to a couple of pieces of important information that should you have the desire to get into this topic in a lot of detail, which a lot of the officials and participants up here tonight have done already, you can go to the town's website, winchester.us, go to the Selectmen's site within that site, and in there will be about a 17-page white paper, mainly prepared by the Board of Selectmen, Jennifer Wilson in particular, together with input from her colleagues on the board, that in essence gives a very good summary of what the entire topic is all about, what's been done about it at the state level to a certain degree, but more directly what's been done about it at the local level, what the board has gone through over the last several years in trying to deal with the issue on behalf of the town. Lots of detailed information, much more. If you have the time to read it, then you would hopefully possibly get out of this evening's presentation. So I direct you to that white paper that's on the town's website. Probably the second most important thing for me to convey, I believe, this evening is that as a result of all the activity that has gone on around the topic in town for several years now, but in a more compressed fashion, what's happened over the last 2 months, the town, the selectmen, have put forward a draft plan. And it's a draft mitigation plan, again, on the website. It has been mailed today to all 512 retirees or so. And it has been communicated to those folks who represent the local Winchester retirees over the last couple of weeks and month or so. And in essence, it is a shift from the approach that the board had been taking to help mitigate the cost of this rate change, premium rate change for Winchester retirees, from more of a means-based, income-based test to kind of an outright shifting of some of the rates and a stepped-in process so that everyone in the plan enjoys a slower increase to that 50-50 table and that 50-50 split. The main features are that it'll take place over 2 years, and half the increase for any group that any retiree may find themselves in will be implemented as of July 1st of this year. The second half will be for most or many of the members implemented as of July 1st of 2015. For those members that are on Medicare, the first half again goes into effect in July of 2014. The second half would be implemented in January of 2016 because of a feature that our own plan provider will be implementing to line increases in rates, if they do occur, to what happens in the Medicare system, which runs on a January to December basis rather than a fiscal year, as we do, July to June. The major change, as I mentioned, is kind of an outright leveling of the effort to reform this plan. For those employees that have retired in Winchester before 2004, they will shift to a rate over that 18-month period that looks like 70%, 30%, and the remainder of the retirees in the plan will shift to a rate that approximates 50% to 50% over that 2-year basis. In addition to that, there'll be a mitigation fund, kind of a safety net of sorts that the town will put in place each year as part of its budget building toward health care costs. And that will be based, or aid out of that safety net fund will be based on an income and means tested basis. There'll be an application process that over the coming months, the town officials will work on, again, plenty of communication and information is intended for the retiree group. They'll get direct mailings and also information over the website about how to avail themselves of that additional fund of money should they find themselves qualified to be able to do that. So those features, again, for commentary are up on the website. The selectmen have asked that all comments that people may have come in on or before April 4th, a week from this coming Friday. And the expectation is that the board will vote a final plan on Monday, April 7th. And from that point in time, as I mentioned, we will communicate those changes to retirees as we work towards this July 1st, 2014 implementation date. So those are two big pieces of information that I would want to make sure that I get out and get everybody aware of up front. There's obviously a ton of information that could fit into a couple of hours of discourse around this topic, but you have some very intelligent people who know the real intricacies of the topic, so hopefully over the next 10 minutes or so we'll be able to give you the background as to why we're here. Patty will follow me and tell you about the good work that her finance colleagues have done to measure this liability on behalf of the town. I will merely try to put it in context for you this way. I came into the position in January of 2012, just a little over 2 years ago. And one of the first things we were faced with was trying to get a handle on our health care costs overall. For the entire town, health care for active and retiree benefits cost approximately $13 million. The town pays for, again, these are kind of broad-based approximations, about $10 million of that in the budget process each year. Employees pay, that's a combination of active and retired, pay about $3 million of that 13. Did I lose my microphone here? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that better? Yes. And within the subgroup of retirees, the cost for insurance is about $3 million. 3 of that $13 million is attributable to the cost for insuring the plans for retirees. Of that $3 million, retirees contribute about $650,000. The town contributes the other $2.4 million. Several years ago, the town was faced with analyzing this so-called OPEB liability, other post-employment benefits. And at that time, it was given a figure of $93 million, an outstanding liability to take care of the existing group of retirees, about 512 of them, and the anticipated active employees that would migrate into retirement status after the course of their careers here with the town. All other cities and towns across the entire country, but in Massachusetts in particular, along with us, we're forced with measuring that same large number. There's been a lot of publicity about it. It really is a liability that is causing a lot of consternation for public officials across the United States, again, Massachusetts in particular, and Winchester specifically. So beginning in 2012, when I came in, one of the first tasks that the FinCom kind of gave to me was, look, we've measured our liability here. We really have to come up with a plan to be able to reduce this liability. We have to do it in some way that alleviates the burden so that we're not faced with telling the taxpayers that an additional $93 million in benefit costs have to be picked up by them. Over the course of the year, we were doing several other things around health care, plan reform, talking to employees and retirees about other changes that would be made in the design of the insurance that we provide for everybody. And in a very cooperative manner, management and employees implemented a series of changes that over the last couple of years, luckily enough, have brought the cost of health care somewhat to a manageable level. The 10 years, the decade prior to that, almost every community in the Commonwealth was experiencing a 10% or more increase year over year. So that, am I on 2 minutes?
How much time?
I've taken the 10. Well, I'm going to let Patty get Patty will tell you about the OPEB liability and how we got to where we got to. So.
Let's put up a sign.
I don't know.
How much time is left? This will be fun. I'll talk fast. Good evening. My name is Patty Cluley, and I'm representing the Winchester Finance Committee. I would like to provide, actually, I'm not even going to tell you because I'm running late. Let's just go to the next slide. So, due to a new requirement by the Government Accounting Standards Board, Winchester's OPEB liability was first measured and disclosed in FY 2008, at which time it totaled $110 million, about 4 times the town's unfunded pension liability and larger than the town's share of the scheduled Winchester High School renovation. There was no plan to fund this liability, which was expected to grow significantly. Winchester and many communities and states was faced with difficult choices resulting from decades of using the pay-as-you-go method for funding retiree health care and failing to set aside funds for active employees during their service. The failure to pre-fund and associated liability affect a large intergenerational transfer of wealth. GASB's accounting requirement was created to highlight this issue. Benefit costs had been growing more rapidly than revenues for a decade. In the FY11 budget, Winchester taxpayers paid about $5 million of benefits for retirees that should have been paid by previous generations of taxpayers. Spending for these cuts crowds out wage increases for current employees, education, capital improvements, and other current services. Municipal bankruptcies in Central Falls, Rhode Island, and Boise County, Idaho, and others, driven in large part by unfunded retiree benefits, gained national attention. Bond rating agencies indicated their concern regarding municipal OPEB liabilities and heightened their review. The Finance Committee became increasingly concerned as the town failed to address the liability, and since 2011 has pressed for an achievable, sustainable plan to fund it. At Spring 2011 town meeting, FinCom requested that Winchester fully fund the annual required contribution, or ARC, by FY16. The ARC is the annual amount required to achieve full funding and pay off the liability in 30 years. It has 2 main components: the normal cost, which is future costs for current employees, and an amortization payment for the current liability. A fully funded ARC matches current payments with current benefits, begins to fund future expenses, reduces the accounting liability, and protects the town's bond rating. 2 approaches were available to Winchester to close the approximately $2 million annual funding gap. The first would have closed the annual gap by steadily increasing the OPEB contribution. Increasing appropriations would have required deep and ongoing cuts in services, concessions from current employees, and/or an override. There have been 10 operating overrides on the ballot in the past 30 years, 8 of which have failed. The second approach involved changing the town's health plan offerings, contribution rates, or both, thereby lowering the cost curve. This approach reflects the changes voted by the selectmen, which also included the intent to mitigate the impact on current retirees. The changes adopted in Winchester are similar to those occurring throughout the public sector plans nationwide and follow those that occurred in the private sector a decade earlier. A 2011 survey of states indicates that many government entities made similar changes in contributions, deductibles, and copays to those made in Winchester. Additionally, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that approximately 1/4 of state units stopped offering retiree health insurance between 2002 and 2011. Massachusetts healthcare percentage contribution laws are governed by Chapter 32B, Section 9, which requires a ballot initiative and addresses indemnity plans for retirees. After 4 failed attempts in a townwide election, Winchester adopted Section 9A and agreed to contribute 50% to retiree indemnity health plans, subsequently adding surviving spouse and dependent coverage. Town citizens never voted 9E, which would have allowed more than 50% to be contributed to retiree health care indemnity plans. Contributions greater than 50% to indemnity plans for retirees have not been authorized. The Board of Selectmen's November 2012 vote corrected this problem. I'll let Katie talk about the rest, and I'll go to the end. I'd like to close with some items that we have considered and would like to discuss this evening. Is grandfathering fair to generations that follow and to different classes of retirees and employees that receive different treatment? Does the lack of a comprehensive means test create a program that is too costly for taxpayers and subsidizes one group of retirees at the expense of the other? Means testing is commonly used, proven, and manageable. And I am out of time. Okay.
Thank you. We're going to hear next from a representative of the Mass Municipal Association, Katie McCrew.
Good evening, everyone. I want to also thank the League for having me here tonight. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Katie McHugh. I'm in the Legislative Division at the Massachusetts Municipal Association. I've been there for a little over 3 years, and my work focuses on our personnel and labor portfolio. So that's pensions, healthcare, collective bargaining. So I get to spend a lot of time with my friend Sean, who's on the other side of the table over there. So I was asked to come here tonight to join with my colleagues from Winchester to give you the statewide picture and talk to you a little bit about what are the trends that we're seeing across the state. So I'm going to start with sharing with you why this is such a big topic, why we're talking about this now, why it's so important to municipalities, and then talk to you about what I like to call the three-legged stool, which are sort of the three different buckets of things that can be done to help manage your other post-employment benefit liability. So first of all, why are we talking about this? And Patty started to talk about this. There are requirements now to report your liability. For decades and decades and decades, communities were lumping together what they were paying for active employees and what they were paying for retired employees and just paying it as they go and never separating that out anywhere. So no one actually knew what your liability was. So now there's requirements, and that's one of the reasons that we're talking about this. The current municipal liability for communities across the Commonwealth is $30 billion. That's how much cities and towns across the Commonwealth would have to pay today if they had to pay out benefits for all of their employees that are retired and receiving benefits and employees that benefits are owed to, and that's the ARC that Patty talked about. Most communities in Massachusetts pay at least 50% of the premium, and in fact, according to a Mass Municipal Association survey that we conducted last spring, most communities are paying closer to 65 to 70% of the premium. So it's a big number, and it's a big deal. As we know, healthcare costs are rising faster than revenues, and there's not a lot you can do to control healthcare costs. And there's also not a lot you can do locally to control revenue in the Proposition 2.5 era other than go out for overrides, as Patty talked about. Another reason why this is such an issue for municipalities, it's certainly an issue at the state level, and the state talks about their OPEB liability too, but particularly for municipalities is you have more than double the number of employees that the state has, and a big reason for that is the teachers. So for pensions, the state owns the pension liability for teachers, but for retiree health insurance benefits, cities and towns own that liability. So that's one of the reasons why it's such a big deal for municipalities. And speaking of pensions, when we talk about the $30 billion liability for retiree health insurance, that's more than double the liability that municipalities have for pensions. And part of that was in the 80s, there were laws passed that required communities to create funding schedules for their pensions. So right now, according to a recent Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation report, about 54% of pension liability is funded total, or on track to be funded on these pension schedules statewide. Less than 1% of retiree health insurance benefits are actually funded. So that just puts into context sort of what we're talking about and why this is such a big deal for municipalities. So very briefly, the three-legged stool that I like to talk about. First, there's legislation that can happen at the state level to help you to actually change benefits. And I'm not going to talk a lot about that because there's legislation currently pending. I can say this because it's no secret that legislation is not going anywhere this legislative session. It is pending. It would make sweeping changes to who's eligible for benefits. It would also make a couple of changes that the Mass Municipal Association is opposed to that would take away local authority to ever change the contribution for retiree benefits. It would also mandate that all communities pay this benefit even if they never adopted the sections of 32B to do so. But that legislation is pending and it'll be picked up again in the next legislative session. So what are some things that you can do and what are some trends we're seeing across the state? We're starting to see that communities are putting money aside for their OPEB liability. By show of hands, anecdotally, when we're in a room of local officials, we think that about a third to half of communities communities are doing something. Something could mean setting up a trust locally in your community, or it could mean investing in the state's fund, which currently 14 communities are doing, and there's another 20 or so that are looking at it. Communities are using money from the hotel, motel, and meals tax to start to fund their OPEB liability. They're using money from Chapter 69 municipal health insurance savings to fund that liability, money from Medicare Part D reimbursements, free cash. Those are some of the trends that we're seeing across the state. But I think it's important to note that when we say something, we really mean a drop in the bucket. And it's one of the reasons why we need to have this bigger conversation about who's eligible for the benefits and what does it take to be eligible. And I'll wrap up with the third leg of this three-legged stool, which are some local things that we're seeing cities and towns do to help manage the benefit. So one piece of it is what's happening at the state level, one piece is funding, and then there are things you can do locally. And a lot of those are things that are already being talked about here are happening in Winchester. So that's adopting municipal health insurance reform and actually changing the plan for active employees. That's changing premium contributions, and that's a big part of what we're talking about tonight. Prorating benefits for part-time employees. Currently, there's no consensus across the state on that. And then we're doing what we're doing tonight, which is improving analysis and awareness. So I'll stop there and we'll pick it up later during Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speakers represent the retirees. We have Jan Dolan, a retired Winchester teacher, Peter Haley, former selectman and school committee member, and John Frangillo, Winchester firefighter and president of Firefighters Local 1564. Looks like we're starting with Peter Haley.
The Finance Committee usually leaves when I speak, so. We're going to try and divide our time evenly this evening between myself, John Frangillo, and Jan Dolan, so I'll try to be mindful of my 5 minutes. That being said, I think my remarks may be a little bit short, so I would like to take this opportunity at the beginning, since we're here to talk about the service that municipal employees have provided to all of us and what we can provide for them. This afternoon in the city of Boston, we lost 2 firefighters. So I'd like to use 30 seconds of my time and ask you to join me in just a moment of silence for those men that we lost this afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm here this evening at the invitation of the group of retired Winchester employees, and I'd like to speak briefly from my own experience in addressing these type of issues in Winchester town government and elsewhere of the type of factors that I believe should inform our discussion. And I have 3 points to make. The first is that I think our presence here tonight is testimony to the natural tension that arises in the exercise of any budgeting authority, whether it's in town, state, or federal government, or any other forum or enterprise. And at times this tension is uncomfortable, but I also think that it's productive. And at its best, like tonight, it can bring out the strongest arguments from both sides of the issue. Should we spend these amounts on this category or should we not? And I think it's important that we view things in the light of what's the best policy decision for the town, and not in an ad hominem or personal light. We don't decide to deny employee health care benefits on the basis that our employer has denied them to us. While in some instances a market analysis is helpful, a gauge of our resentment is not. Similarly, we don't personalize issues. We should not decide to pay health care benefits for someone because we feel sorry for them. And we should not castigate or attack decision makers as personally lacking empathy because they are making difficult financial decisions. We should make decisions based on what's the best policy for ourselves and the citizens that we live with here in Winchester. Second, it's important that we're careful about not succumbing to arguments that present solutions that appear to be mandated by law or financial accounting requirements or some other outside force that offers an easy out. Well, we would like to solve this, but we can't because we have to do it this way because of X. These arguments are always attractive because they allow us to avoid any personal responsibility, and they allow us to present ourselves as the subject of forces that we can't control. Usually these arguments fit well within an H.L. Mencken quote that I like that says, "For every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong." and that is certainly the case here. Let's address a few of those issues. Is the town required by law to pay health care benefits at the current rate? It is not. Is the town required by law to make the annual required contribution, the ARC payment, to create a fund for post-employment benefits? It is not. Will the town's failure to make the full ARC payment annually have a material impact on the cost of public debt in Winchester? It will not. Is the town's financial condition and the stress of its post-employment benefit obligations analogous to municipal failures such as Detroit or San Bernardino County or Central Falls, Rhode Island? No, it is not. The assets in the town of Winchester exceed its liabilities by some $149 million. From last fiscal year to this fiscal year, our financial condition improved by some $8 million. Without taking a single action, if you look at the comptroller's website on the Town of Winchester website, it'll have a report of the OPEB liability. Other than funding some $750,000, over the past 3 years, we have done nothing. And yet, our OPEB liability has been reduced from $110 million to some $60 million today, a $50 million reduction. $8 million of that reduction is a result of the actions that the selectmen took. But the balance is simply because of changing assumptions that we make when we calculate that liability. The reality of the liability has not changed. So we can change retiree health care benefits or we cannot change them. But that's our decision. Let's be clear that it's not a gratuitous decision, though. We should think about the factors that are important to us. Should we account for the cost of future promises that we make to our employees and reserve for them as a best practice? Yes. Do we need to make that 50-year course correction from pay-as-you-go to full reserve all at once? No. Should we provide our employees and retirees with better guidance as to our obligations to them when they are employed and as they retire? Of course we should. Has the nature of what we promised, health care, changed? Yes, it's become more expensive. And having implicitly made a promise, should we do our best to keep it as a community, even if the cost to us has increased beyond what we expected? Yes. Should our employee benefits be treated as matters of municipal charity? If you need help paying for it, we will give it to you? No. Do these choices have a real and substantive impact on every part of our budget? And do they have a real and substantive impact on individuals who've worked on our behalf? Yes. And finally, third, and this is my last point, can we have a thoughtful and reasoned discussion about these issues in a way that leads to a constructive compromise? A compromise where there's not a winner and a loser, but an outcome that preserves our inherent obligations to those who have worked with us in the past, and at the same time ensures that we will continue to preserve our community for those who will work with us, live with us, and be educated with us in the future. I think the events of the past week and the efforts of Mr. Howard, the town manager, and the Board of Selectmen, as well as the cooperation of the retiree, clearly shows that the answer to that question is a resounding yes. And for my own behalf, I'd like to thank those individuals for the work that they have done to bring us where we are this evening. Thank you.
I'm Jan Dolan. Disagreements are a part of life, and for the past several months, the town of Winchester has witnessed major disagreements between the Board of Selectmen and the town's retired employees. And tonight, thanks to the League of Women Voters, you can hear these opinions. So, who are these gray-haired old ladies and grumpy old men who have caused such a rumpus? Well, they are the town of Winchester retirees, the people who maintained our town's buildings, parks, fields, streets, water system, cemetery, transfer station, protected us from fires and floods, transported us to the hospital, kept us safe and protected us from crime, provided clerical services, staffed our library and the Jenks Center, and educated the children of our town. Each of these retirees contributed so much to the quality of life in Winchester. So what caused these retirees to have such spirit and vigor? Well, the Board of Selectmen's vote of November 5th of 2012 changed the provisions of the retirees' health insurance. You've heard that tonight. And in July, there was a substantial increase in the co-pays and deductibles. and effective this July, the second change is scheduled, and it raises the retirees' premium share, an increase that I will describe as draconian. The retirees' immediate reaction was shock. The common response was, "I cannot believe the town of Winchester is doing this." And we were blindsided. So what do? We met with town manager, heard about OPEB and GASP, and we got no answer to our question, why was there no opportunity for public comment before the vote? In October, we were granted a short period of time on the Selectmen's agenda. We stated our position and presented a petition with 700 signatures, which requested that the issue be rescinded. And at that time, we said we really would like an opportunity to talk with the Selectmen. Can I have chart 1, please? Finally, this February, thanks to the efforts of Representative Jason Lewis, the town manager, representatives of the Selectmen, and retirees have met, and the talks are ongoing. And the retirees in that period of time have presented 3 plans for consideration. Retirees have no union rights, and the only power we have is the power of the pen and the power of the voice. And we've been overwhelmed by the support of many Winchester citizens and the many, many retirees who encouraged us to fight the good fight. We have submitted an article for the warrant of the spring town meeting. Chart 2, please. What are the benefits for retirees? Every retiree is eligible for health insurance. Every retiree receives a pension. The educators contribute to the Mass Teachers Retirement System. The other municipal employees contribute to the town's retirement system. By state law, public school teachers do not pay into Social Security retirement system. Chart 2, please. This chart shows the retirement average pension for Winchester teachers divided by age. And chart 3, please. This chart shows the proposed health insurance premium splits for a 90-year-old retiree. Currently, a 90-year-old retiree pays $1,228 per year. At the proposed 50 split, a typical 90-year-old retiree will pay $4,093 a year, and that's a $2,865 increase. Now add this to the huge increase in co-pays and deductibles, which went into effect this past July. And we know because of this increase, some retirees do forego medical appointments and prescriptions because they can't afford them. In the words of retiree Barbara Holden, whom I hold in the highest regard, she said, "At 92, I appeal to you on behalf of my fellow retirees as well as myself. Please reconsider your decision that puts so many retired educators in jeopardy." In chart 4, this chart shows the percentage of health insurance share for each community in the Middlesex League. And if Barbara Holden could be here tonight and could see the chart of Middlesex League communities, she would be appalled to see the town of Winchester's share of retiree health premium payments compared to almost every other neighboring community. And so, Barbara, if you were here, you would have been very happy to hear what Mr. Howard said. The Board of Selectmen has responded to your request, and Monday night, this past Monday night, they voted to place a draft plan on the table and request public comment. They will vote on that plan, as you heard, Monday, April 7th. And John Frangelo will now come up.
I'm going to have to read a little bit faster. During the past 18 years, I've served on various town health insurance committees, working with other union presidents and voting on insurance changes and adjustments. During that time, I have received countless phone calls from my dad, who retired from the police department, and many of his friends asking for explanations of the proposed insurance changes. They're worried, and unless you have spoken with these older retirees, you just can't imagine how important insurance costs are to them. They see insurance costs rising. They fear that the higher costs will prevent them from being independent in their old age. They see themselves as having no control over what is happening to them, and they worry that the town they were proud to serve is failing them. Many are worried because they do not qualify for Medicare. Winchester currently has 100 non-Medicare retirees. Our non-Medicare retirees must enroll in the same insurance plans as the active employees. But at a proposed 50% rate, they are being asked to pay twice as much for their health care premium share as the active employee. Even active duty firefighters are worried. Firefighters and policemen are encouraged to retire at age 55 with 32 years on the job because there's a greater risk of injury as they get older. If a firefighter or policeman is injured on the job, then the town is obligated to pay 72% of their salary and 100% of the health care costs related to their injury for the rest of their lives. This raises the town's health insurance cost. Several firefighters and policemen who are over 55 feel that they cannot retire because they don't qualify for Medicare and they can't afford to pay the expensive health care premiums. If the town wants firefighters and policemen to retire at 55 and the town wants to reduce its long-term disability costs, then they should offer some relief in health care rates. I am a good example. I have worked as a firefighter EMT for 37 years. If I retired today, I'd be a 60-year-old non-Medicare retiree at the 50% rate. My family plan insurance costs would go from $5,500 a year to over $11,000 plus co-pays and deductibles, and that would be approximately 25% of my pension. I have to stop. Thank you.
Don't worry, if this is a lot of information, we will be going back over a lot of this information in the questions that I have, which were prepared by the League of Women Voters after being solicited from members of the community. The first question is for Selectman Fontana. You didn't think you were going to get away without speaking. I'm terribly sorry. I did not allow Sean Duhamel from the Association of Retired State, County, and Municipal Employees Association to speak. Sorry.
I thought I was off the hook there for a minute. Well, first of all, my name is Sean Duhamel. I'm with the Mass Retirees Association. I'm the legislative liaison. I've been with the association now for 20 years, and for about the last 10 years, I've been the association's point person on healthcare policy and engaged with the Group Insurance Commission in a number of cities and towns across Massachusetts, as well as at the national level, dealing with this very important and complicated issue. But before I get too far into it, I want to thank the League of Women Voters here in Winchester for the opportunity to be here this evening as your guest and to share our thoughts on this issue and why we're very concerned about some of the things going on here in Winchester, but also encouraged at the same time by the dialogue that's taking place here and some of the movement we're seeing, hopefully to find some common ground to correct this issue moving forward. But our association has been around since 1968, believe it or not, almost 50 years. We represent approximately 60,000 public retirees across Massachusetts from all walks of public retirement, from here to Provincetown, all the way out to Pittsfield and the Berkshires. All public retirees fall under our purview. And over the years, our association has taken a very proactive approach when it comes to both pension and health care policy. We're not the typical organization that simply draws a line in the sand and says everything's fine, there's nothing to see here, never change benefits. We understand that pensions, health care, Social Security, Medicare, these are all very important government and public policies and benefits for folks. We don't view them as entitlements. We pay for them, you pay for them, everybody pays for them. But they're also very expensive. They're very expensive for the public sector, they're very expensive for the private sector. All across the country, one of the most controversial and complicated issues right now is what to do about health care. That's no different here in Winchester. However, what is a little bit unique in Winchester is the approach that's been taken over the last couple of years is trying to find a solution to this problem, and that's what's led us here tonight. Across Massachusetts, as Katie McHugh from the MMA pointed out, and she's been a very good friend of ours, and we try to work with the MMA as much as possible. Together, we were part of a statewide commission 2 years ago studying the OPEB issue. I represented our association on the commission. There was a member from the MMA, along with members of the legislature. It's something that Representative Jason Lewis has been quite involved in and kept a close eye on, and I certainly appreciate the support that he's given to the retirees here in Winchester on this issue, and we look forward to working with him in the future. But through 10 months, our association and the other 11 members of the commission studied the OPEB issue. We met with experts from around the country, including the bond rating agencies, who are also following this issue very closely. And what we learned is simply that knee-jerk reactions and cost shifting aren't the answer to solving this. It's much more complicated than that. In the days of simply pushing the costs off on retirees, the folks, quite frankly, who can least afford this, and for instance, here in Winchester, the average age of a municipal retiree, those who worked for the town itself and excluding teachers, is 76 years old. Believe it or not, the average pension of these folks, or those folks, many of you in the audience, is $22,000 a year. That's the average pension here in Winchester for a town retiree. They simply cannot afford a 50-50 split on their health insurance as being swept in overnight. It's not necessary, and it simply cannot be afforded by our members. So that's why we're here, and that's why we're very, very concerned. Now, the approach that's being taken across the Commonwealth by a number of communities, because again, this is not unique to Winchester. It's not even unique to Massachusetts. It's being addressed all across the country. But what is unique to Massachusetts is that we're trying to do something about this and get out in front of the problem. We're not simply going to sit back and wait for the Central Falls or the Detroits to come to rest here in our backyard. That's not going to happen here. There's no indication that's even going to happen. But what's unique in Winchester is racing to 50-50, racing to increase co-payments and deductibles when there are other solutions available. For instance, joining the State Group Insurance Commission is one of them. Using the savings that are going to be generated here in just a short few years when the Winchester retirement system, when the unfunded liability is paid off in 2021. Your retirement system here in Winchester is 90% funded right now. It's one of the best funded retirement systems in the Commonwealth. That debt will be paid off in 2021, thereabouts. That money could then be shifted over to help pay off some of this unfunded liability as it's related to health care, which in fact is not a new cost. I want to point that out. These unfunded liabilities for health care are not new costs. They've always existed. The only thing that's new is the fact that we have to report them. And I got my red sign, so I'm going to stop now and look forward to answering questions. But thank you once again. Thank you.
All right, now we'll go on to the first question for Selectman Fontana. The Selectmen have just issued a draft of a plan on their website, which is phasing in the changes over 2 years, having some retirees at a 50-50 split and others at a 70-30 split, and creating a small mitigation fund. But their original plan, which is still in effect, was to go to a 50-50 split as of this July 1st. We wanted to know why the Board of Selectmen originally chose the most aggressive plan, the 50-50 split, what other options they considered, such as going to the state GIS and mitigation and grandfathering retirees, and what is the difference between the plans in the town cost and the cost to retirees?
Thank you. Could you remind me how much time we have to answer each question?
You have about 5 minutes, 2 minutes for your response, and then we'll ask the opinion of other people. If you give really interesting responses, I'll let you go on a little longer. But start with a 2-minute response.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll try to answer that. That's a really complex question. I might have to ask you to repeat the last portion about the cost and then I might actually ask Richard or Patty to chime in because we're all going to work together. I respect the question. I'm not sure I agree with the whole premise and some of the language in the question, but let me state it this way. First of all, and I very much disagree with what Sean had said, and I'm going to deal with it in the facts rather than language. The town has made significant strides. The town has made significant changes. This is an incredibly proactive community. It's a community that embraces its citizens, that embraces its employees. We actually look forward. We're one of the leading communities when it comes to energy and green communities. We were one of the leading communities when it came to hiring our town manager in terms of the process we chose. And we're also trying to do the same thing with OPEB. We've done significant changes since Richard has come in. We've turned the budget from a deficit to a balanced budget. We changed the healthcare provider. We changed the healthcare plan design. We did do healthcare plan benefit changes through collective bargaining. We also did a look-alike plan to the GIC. So I'm not sure where Sean's getting his facts, but he's wrong. So we've done a lot. With regards to the 50-50, to be clear on that, the Board of Selectmen have been talking about this issue for a while. As a matter of fact, we dealt with it because the last operating override that we went to pass failed. And that operating override was to significantly go to collective bargaining, to pay higher wages and benefits, and to increase the school budget. And the town rejected that operating override. So in a prior board, actually maybe even two prior boards, we had to make some significant changes. Part of what Richard has engineered in terms of cost savings and helping to re-engineer the town, but also part of it was dealing with sort of the healthcare issues. And Richard can talk about how he's taken our growth rate on healthcare service expenses from 15% to 5%. So I disagree with Peter Haley about the OPEB liability has come down by doing nothing. It's come down by doing significant changes. Those are what's embedded in that. The 50-50 was a proposal, but as you saw the other night, we have not actually formally adopted a plan. Part of it was a proposed 50-50. Then we had the mitigation.
I thought the selectmen had taken a vote in 2012 to go to the 50-50, or taken a recent vote that as of July 1st, you go to a 50-50 for all retirees.
That's
Am I
correct,
wrong about that?
No, not for all retirees. Not for all retirees. So some of the facts are being
Right.
kind of overlooked and shifted around.
Right.
So
Because
we may have to
that's part of the continuing dialogue. If we had gone with that 50-50, we wouldn't have come up with the plan we came out on Monday night.
So
which
what
was
you're saying is
70-30.
the draft plan that you now have is the plan that's on the table and has superseded any previous vote the selectmen have taken?
Effectively, yeah. It's an iterative process. Policy making is an iterative process. It's not very binary. It's not black and white. It's a continual work in progress. The proposed changes were going in July 1st. I mean, there was and the mitigation plan was part of the change, which was what we were working on to make it sort of comprehensive. And what we decided to do was put less in sort of a mitigation fund and more of the economics toward changing the plan design.
All right, I'll cut you off there so other people can speak. I'd like to hear what the retirees think of the specific options that have been offered. Start with Jan Dolan or any one of the retirees that would like to speak.
I think I can respond to the question as well as to why the selectmen chose the 50-50. I think they were motivated quite obviously by two things. One is the OPEB liability as an accounting issue is a large issue. So when you're making small incremental changes on a liability that at the time is viewed as something between $60 and $100 million, you can't affect it much unless you make material changes. So one of the things that motivated them was, let's try and reduce this number so that the annual contribution is manageable. But I think the other thing that motivated them was something that was clearly political at the time. Ms. McHugh made reference to a pending bill in the legislature now. It doesn't look at this time as if that bill has any chance of success. That was not so clear at the time the selectmen took their action. And at the time that they took it, one of the things that the bill proposes to do is to freeze the existing rates. Winchester, depending on your point of view, quite either adroitly or opportunistically got in front of that by going to a 50-50 rate so that if the bill were to be successful, it would have locked in that liability. I think that with respect to the plans that have been proposed, that they just came out yesterday and the retirees are in the process of evaluating them. But they go far, as Mr. Howard said, to not just providing mitigation, but to making a material change for retirees, especially those who retired before 2004. So the changes that have been made are quite welcome, quite substantial and material, and I think very important. One last point on the OPEB liability itself that Mr. Fontana made reference to. There are two things mathematically which drive that, and they are what the discount rate is, the stream of future payments. The higher the discount rate that we use, the more that we reduce the eventual liability. And the other is the assumption that we make for the amount of healthcare growth. How much is it going to increase every year? Those two factors, when we're estimating a current payment for a future liability, have a very large and material effect. And those assumptions, which are not always stated because they're complex formulas, really result in a lot of the changes that we see.
Since Mr. Duhamel was mentioned in a previous response, I'll give him a chance to reply.
Thank you very much. And if we want to address some facts, the fact is that the Winchester Board of Selectmen has overreacted, in my opinion, in this case. 2 years ago, they sent a letter out to the retirees announcing that co-payments and deductibles were going up in one fiscal year and that they were going to 50-50 in terms of their insurance premium the following fiscal year. And maybe we misread that, but it seemed from the tone of the letter that went out to our members that that decision had already been made. And Mr. Selectman, if you're saying that now that's being reconsidered, then I congratulate you for that. But when I said that Winchester is acting differently than its peers, the facts are what they are. The surrounding communities have a much different health care benefit than Winchester. For instance, Arlington's 85-15. Everett, 85-15. The only surrounding community that's at 50-50, and they've always been at 50-50, is the town of Belmont. So when a retiree or an employee went to work for the town of Belmont, they knew the deal. They knew that it was a 50-50 split when they retired, so that hasn't been changed. Lexington's at 50-50. Medford, 50-50, or 80-20. Melrose, 87-13. The other difference with the surrounding communities, with the exception of Belmont and Everett, every single, and Woburn, all of your surrounding border communities are in the Group Insurance Commission. Now, I don't know if a study has been done here in Winchester comparing the current insurance benefits here in the town to what is offered by the GIC. The position of our association is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. We do not encourage nor discourage any community from joining the GIC. It needs to be a decision of the retirees, the active employees in the town, as to what makes the best financial sense for everybody involved. But I don't know, and there's no indication that that type of study has been done here in Winchester that may have made these changes unnecessary in the first place. Thank you.
I'd respectfully like to request 5 more minutes, and this is why. So if you allow them to respond to my answer to the question, I was actually responding to what they had said in their opening dialogues. I don't remember getting a chance to discuss whether I agreed or not agreed to Sean. So I would like actually Richard to talk about why we didn't go into the GIC. Patty might have some information about peer communities. And Katie actually talked about what peer communities are doing. Many communities were 50-50, some were 60-40, some were 70-30. We're actually just going to what those peer communities are. We're talking about all municipalities in general, and we are making significant headway into OPEB. So we're doing a lot that other communities aren't. And if you want to compare to communities, we're one of the few AAA balance sheet communities. If you want to look at the way communities are run, go look at those other towns. See whether their budgets are balanced. See what they do in terms of how they treat the taxpayers. Go look at their school, the quality of the school services. And also, if you want, go look at what Woburn just did in their most recent vote about employee health care. This town operates very differently than peer communities. So it's a small community. It's 95% residential base. Many of us work here as well as live here. We raise our kids here.
I'm going to cut you off there and go on to the next question.
We need to make sure we keep that in the right context. So I'd like Richard to comment.
Well, the next question actually is for the town manager, Richard Howard. And I'd like to move on to the next subject. You can get back to this subject if you have time. Originally, the Finance Committee proposed fully funding the OPEB liability by 2045, but for the third year in a row, the town manager's budget has provided no additional funding above the current annual required costs of retired health care benefits. So This year, if the town does actually go to the 50-50 split, I understand they would save about $800,000. How is the money that's going to be saved be spent if it is not going to be put into the OPEB trust fund?
Well, the very direct and short answer to that, June, is 2/3 of it under the proposed plan, and let me put a big comma and parenthetical point in here. What we would hope everybody would focus on is not where we've been, not what was decided in 2012, and there are all good reasons for that, and I wanted an opportunity to expound on what they are. But the point is, the board has announced a new plan. Something that they said back in 2012, they said they would do, that they would put a comprehensive, compassionate, robust mitigation plan in place. That's what they're doing now. We should be talking a little bit about what's being proposed, because a lot of the facts that have been put before you by our esteemed colleagues on the other panel don't apply anymore under what's being proposed. So let's talk about your question, June, which is what happens to a theoretical $800,000 cost shift that would take place in July of this year. Well, under the current plan, 2/3 of it would be given back to plan holders.
Given back to
over
what?
$500,000, $560,000 under the first phase of the plan would remain with the retirees. It would not come to the town. On an ongoing basis, because it'd be permanent, and I'm going to ask for more time on this, Marilyn, because it's a complicated question, if you don't mind. About $250,000 of that will remain permanently with the pre-2004 retirees, whose rate is proposed to go to 70%, 30% town retiree. That rate translates into a payment monthly of $110. That's what over 300 of the 500 retirees that are currently in the plan will end up paying at the end of this plan if it's adopted by the board. So 300 of 500 will pay a monthly rate of about $110.
Okay.
Another 180 will pay about $180 a month. So the plan going forward is a compassionate one, gives back a large amount of the proposed $800,000 delta that would have been resulted from a 50-50 split back to the retirees, at least in year one, and then a little bit less in year two and beyond. So,
all right, let's see if we can summarize how much the town is actually going to save by the new proposed plan, and whether that saving is going to be put into the OPEB trust fund to to fund the liability, which still exists.
that becomes a matter of budget dynamics. You know, the town taxes as high as it can every year, and out of that taxation, a budget is put together, 70 to 80% of which is to pay salaries and benefits for people in the schools, people in the fire department, people in the police department, the DPW, luckily a town manager, and town hall employees. So whether or not things like additional amounts of money that would be required to fully fund OPEB above and beyond the $3 million that I explained earlier is contributed for retiree insurance costs can be afforded becomes a year-to-year thing. Before the 50-50 vote was taken, the budget would have required an annual increase in order to fund OPEB of $1 million. The town, on an annual basis, enjoys about $2.5 million in new taxation on all resident owners. So to put together a budget that right away would have required not even turning on new lights, paying for raises, trying to keep people employed, just paying an additional $1 million was a non-starter, could not be accomplished.
I'm going to
Now, whether
ask
it-
someone from the retirees.
Now,
group.
whether or not, under the new schedule, that results, if this plan is adopted, we can cover the OPEB differential, is something that my colleagues on FinCom will analyze, and the manager's office will have to take a look at an annual basis. It's going to be a much easier
Fine.
amount
I'm
to
now
try to
going to
find.
ask someone from the retirees group to comment on the retirees paying for the existing OPEB liability. Which of you would like to take that?
Well, I don't think it's the retirees paying for the existing OPEB liability. Those are liabilities that are liabilities of the town, and to the extent that the town creates a fund to fund those, they'll come from the general revenues of the town. Clearly, one of the efforts that the town is making to reduce that number is to change the benefits to the retirees. So they're the ones who have been told, because of this accounting change, this is the piece that we're going to change because it'll help us reduce the number. I think the retirees have shown a remarkable equanimity in terms of dealing with that. Clearly, they were not happy with the way in which the decision was made or announced or delivered originally, but since that time, they've really done a remarkable job of working with their group and having, I think, very honest and productive discussions with the town. The retirees, as we all know, having been educated by many of them, are intelligent and perceptive people. They understand these issues. They know the math. They realize healthcare has increased. They're not blind to the economics of the situation, and they're willing to be part of the solution. They just don't want to be all of the solution or to feel that they have no voice in what took place. So I think the process they have had is one in which they've been having that voice and having that discussion through the efforts of Ms. Dolan, Mr. Frangelo, and others.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Katie McCrew from the MMA to comment on how aggressively other towns are trying to fund their liability.
Sure. So I think it ranges. There's a real range across the state in terms of what communities are doing to fund their liability. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we don't have hard data, but we think about a third to a half of communities are doing something to fund their OPEB liability. Something maybe something as nominal as putting $50,000 into a trust fund, all the way up to some communities that are very aggressively setting aside large amounts of money every single year and investing in the state. There's one community out there, the town of Wellesley, that actually went out for a Proposition 2.5 override many years ago to fund their liability. There are communities that are putting virtually all of their savings or cost avoidance from making municipal health insurance reform changes or joining the Group Insurance Commission into a fund. So I think there's a real range of communities that are looking at making changes in their benefits as well as starting to pre-fund the liability.
Thank you. The next question is for the fireman, Mr. Frangillo. Retirement benefits cannot be considered in isolation. It is often the case in the public sector that wages are lower in exchange for better current benefits and retirement benefits. Has this been true in Winchester? More importantly, how could the town recruit and retain the best and the brightest if they cannot depend on Winchester to honor its obligations? What will be the impact on collective bargaining and employee morale if past agreements in bargaining are not honored?
Okay. Well, I believe that it'll be more difficult for Winchester to hire and retain the best employees. And let me give you an example. In the last 10 years, the town has hired 32 new firefighters and paid for their training programs. And since then, 18 have left for jobs in other towns. And the president of the Winchester Education Association told us that the way Winchester has treated its retirees just conveys a general message that Winchester is not a good employer, that they're out to preserve the bottom line at all costs, even if that means selling out their employees who have contributed to so much to the public service of the town. Many young teachers left last year, and others are currently researching other towns that have a reputation for paying more and offering better health benefits. The best and the brightest candidates do their homework, and many have choices. They will not ignore what is happening in Winchester.
May I respond respond to that?
Well, I was going to put that to the town manager, but if you want to respond, go right ahead.
Do you mind?
Patty Cluley for the finance.
Yeah, I would merely say that, employee retention and training and quality is an important issue across the board. The notion in the question that somehow municipal employees are now an underpaid class of employment especially in Massachusetts, but across the country, I think is a fallacy. I think people are extremely well paid. The benefit package is second to none. Pensions and health care, even with rate changes as they are. Most people in the United States in retirement do not enjoy a health care benefit from their employer. Over 92%, the commission that studied the issue on behalf of the legislature recited the fact that is well known, 92% of employers do not even provide a health care plan in retirement for retirees. The other 8% provide it. The employee pays the whole cost. It's only in municipal government that employees enjoy what they do have, and we do understand that changing it is always a hard thing. But I don't believe that this particular trend that Winchester is looking at or is taking, the step that it's taking, will have a long-term impact on our ability to be able to recruit and retain employees. That goes to the quality of employment in this town. Working with colleagues who appreciate working in the field that they work in. But we believe that the benefit package, together with the rates of wages that are paid, are still of a quality that will attract good people.
Okay. The next question is for Patty Cluley from the Finance Committee. Could you describe the studies which the town undertook to evaluate the impact of higher contributions on the standard of living for different groups of retirees, including those who will never be eligible for Medicare, those who might be eligible but are not yet 65, and those who are Medicare eligible? In deciding to change the health care plan, did the town make an assessment of the combined cost to the retirees?
I believe that's a question for the town manager. The Finance Committee was not a part of those conversations.
June, give me that one again.
All right. The question is, what studies did you do to look at the impact of these proposed changes on the retirees themselves? Some are qualified for Medicare, some are not. Some have pensions, some do not. Can you describe the background information you gathered?
I think we took information from everywhere we could, June, and analyzed it from a number of different angles. We know to a large degree, what the cost is, obviously, of changing the rates in these plans that are proposed, and I'm going to repeat it again. 300 of the 500 retirees under the proposed plan would go to a rate of 70%, 30%. All non-Medicare retirees who are pre-2004 would migrate to that rate as well, even though they may be in an individual or a family plan now. As they get into Medicare and are qualified for it, they would also, under the proposed plan, enjoy the 70-30% rate split.
For 2 years.
Those that never qualify for Medicare and are in their individual plan, they would also enjoy the 70%, 30% rate split. So, that's an accommodation on the rate split that we think addresses their concerns about never, ever being able to qualify for Medicare. But there's only an extremely small handful of those individuals that are currently in the plan, and those that are coming off of active employment are an even smaller amount. I know John's case in particular is important, but we think there are fewer and fewer of those that are in the system that do not qualify for Medicare. But under the current rate structure that's proposed, we think there is a balance that makes it affordable for these
you want to respond? Do you want me
individual
to?
groups of people.
Would one of the retirees
Don't we
like
have
to
a
comment
couple
on
more
the study?
Katie, we have a little more time, right?
Yes, would you
Can I
like
just
to
make one
speak
small
next?
comment? I just want to make one quick comment, and Sean may have some different information. As far as I'm aware, Winchester is the only community that's put thought into creating a mitigation plan purposefully and strictly for retirees based on a change in contribution. And if Sean has different information, I'd be happy to hear it. But I think there are a lot of communities that have created mitigation plans for active employees, and that was part of adopting municipal health insurance reform, so that's happening. But as far as I know, Winchester's the only community that has sat down and really thought about creating a mitigation plan as well for the retirees, and I think that's just worth noting as part of the conversation.
Okay.
Sean, do you know of other communities
There are quite a few communities
that
that
are doing
include.
it for retirees specifically?
That do it for retirees specifically, but typically the mitigation plans are relative to the out-of-pocket costs. For
Right.
instance, the town of
Not for the
Brookline,
premium.
the last 4 or 5 years, has had a mitigation fund for out-of-pocket costs related to prescription drug co-payments and doctors' co-payments.
And Winchester has that as well.
Right, but
That's
not
currently
specific for
in
the
place
premium.
them.
Correct, not specific for the premium.
And John, did you want to reply on the?
Yes, I would like to say something.
Just answer it. No, nobody has.
Could you put up chart 5, please?
No, they can't.
All right, well, the Massachusetts Municipal Association survey of March 2013 reported that communities with more than 500 subscribers paid an average of 73% of the non-Medicare health care premiums, not the 50% proposed by Winchester. In other communities in our Middlesex League sports that we know well, they're between 70 and 80% of the health insurance premiums for the non-Medicare retirees. It's simple.
All right. Before we leave this subject, I'd like to ask the town administrator or the member of the Board of Selectmen to say what efforts were made to inform and engage the retirees about the proposed changes during the process.
Yeah, why don't you speak to that a bit?
Well, since I, together with Mr. Fontana, wasn't on the kind of subgroup that addressed that, but early on, the decision was made in, as we said, November 2012, with the intention of getting to the date, which is 2014, where the changes would be implemented. So beginning at the first of the year, when we knew that in fact we could set our rate, we were getting information on what the rate would be for 2015, fiscal year 2015, and we analyzed all that other information on impacts that I had referenced before June. At that point, we began to have a dialogue with Ms. Dolan and her other group, and I would say over the last 6 weeks to 2 months. Not first. Whatever it was, became very productive. And having listened to some of the concerns they had and some of the issues that they thought were most important to the group that they represented, the plan changed in a big way from what was originally, as I said in my opening remarks, something that would be means-tested and income-based, to something that is now kind of an across-the-board change in what the rate was proposed to be. And it operates in many ways to be the same amount of money that probably is at stake. It may go across the board rather than to individuals who, because of their income, may need it specifically, but we think it's a plan that is now in place as a result of the contributions that they made to the dialogue.
So Ms. Dolan was on a group that met with the selectmen. Could you comment on the retirees' engagement in the process?
Be happy to. You recall in my comments, I said back in October we had asked to have conversations with the selectmen or their representatives, and several letters followed that. And finally, in February, we did have that opportunity, which we were pleased to have that chance. We wished it would have been earlier. And in that, we've exchanged plans. And frankly, we're pleased that the selectmen have put forth a plan Monday night. We have not had much chance to analyze it, and we plan to do that this week. In terms of this mitigation fund, which is troubling to us in general, For the people who need it, well, maybe this is a false statement, but I'm going to guess that the elderly will probably be the prime candidates for that. And those are the people who need the most help in filling out forms, and their pride is hurt, and personal finance documents. It seems to me that that's a staggering request of elderly people to come forth in order to get some money, which they probably think they deserved anyway. And so we're not particularly excited about that kind of a fund. They don't want charity, and that's what it looks like.
Thank you. Since we moved on to the mitigation fund, I'd like to talk about that a little more with both of you. A number of retirees and community members have suggested that the mitigation fund could be administratively difficult to handle. It could be costly for the town, perhaps not funded every year, and onerous for the retirees to apply for an earned benefit on the basis of need. As I understand it, the proposal is to put aside $55,000, and that will only be available for 3 years. So can you comment, would a member of the town committee's comment on whether you feel, how you feel this will address the most needy segment of the retirees?
Yeah, I would say, June, that the most needy segment, we believe, is addressed in the shift from a 50-50 with a means test, income-based mitigation plan to the 70-30 plan. So the 70%, 30% proposed shift instead of the 50-50%, we believe leaves the benefit affordable for almost the entire class of 300-plus retirees who would be affected by that. So as I mentioned earlier, the monthly payment for everyone that would fall into that classification, and again, it's over 300 of the 500, would have a cost of $110 a month for their benefit. That's much cheaper than anything that can be purchased out on the private market. It's a more robust plan than exists anywhere in the private market. The coverage is better and more inclusive. It follows the employee anywhere in the United States. So it's a Medicare joined plan that people can not have to live in Massachusetts, can live in Florida, anywhere in the United States, and it covers entirely their cost. A small out-of-pocket payment for certain designer drugs and...
But the mitigation plan in particular.
And the mitigation plan would be above and beyond
that.
that. So for anyone who had $110 a month could not find themselves affording that, then the mitigation fund would be there for that retiree to be able to say to the town of Winchester, even at $110 a month, I can't afford it based upon my household income and budget. And we would probably put an application, very simple application process in place.
They're not hearing you. You need.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So can you tell us specifically, you have $55,000 for 3 years. How many retirees would be able to receive how much of a benefit in that period?
Well, it's hard to say exactly, Jim, because it would be on a case-by-case basis, you know, whether or not a person qualified. We're using the Affordable Care Act standards for income to determine whether or not, again, beyond the first effort to get mitigation in the form of the 70%, 30% rate split proposal, whether anyone beyond that would be entitled or eligible, so to speak, based upon the Affordable Care Act standards. That's what would be used. And if the person fills out what we feel will be a very simple application process and shows that even at the level that we're anticipating, they still need additional assistance, then that fund would be there. We would figure that over the next several years, as we roll this out, we will have a better idea of how many people we may have missed, so to speak, or have circumstances beyond which we kind of did not anticipate in setting up the rate split the way it's proposed now, and if the town had to, I'm sure it would reevaluate whether or not more money should go into that fund.
And I'd like one of the retirees to respond on the mitigation fund particularly.
So I think Mr. Howard is correct that the conversation has really changed away from a mitigation fund to a change in the policy so that it's going to back to 70-30 and not all the way to 50-50. The issue with the mitigation fund, and one of the reasons the retirees have lobbied so hard against that as being the sole remedy, is that, first of all, the whole notion of the mitigation fund is, well, we'll give you this if you really need it. If you come to us and demonstrate that you have a financial need, then we will fulfill to you what our implicit promise was about health care benefits. The retirees feel, one, that's not the basis of their argument. It isn't give this to us because we're poor and needy. It's give this to us because it's the right thing to do. It's what you implicitly promised to us when we retired. And it is wrong for you to go back on your promise because it's become inconvenient to you to keep it. The other reason is that social research shows us demonstratively that when you set up these funds, you lose people. People don't apply because they do not want to have to provide that financial information or make that demonstration to the town. We know that in this building because we charge children in this building a fee to play athletics. And we say to them, don't worry, if you can't afford it, we'll help you. But we know that children don't play athletics in this building because they do not want to come to us and say, I can't afford it. And the retirees are no different, nor is any other group. It should not be a question of municipal charity, but a question of municipal obligation. And that's why the retirees resist the issue of mitigation.
But Mr. Haley, we don't then provide sports to all children for free because...
Excuse me? Mr. Duhamel is going to speak next.
Okay. I'd like to add just a quick point of clarification. We do appreciate that the selectmen are making this effort, but it needs to be clarified that the change in contribution rates to 70-30, that's only good for 2 years. There's nothing in this plan that addresses what happens at the end of the 2 years. My read of it goes to 50-50.
If you wouldn't mind, it's important to get the facts straight, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Sean, but I think I said at the beginning of my remarks, you can look at the plan, and please do it on the website. But it's a proposal to have the rate perpetually until some other board votes otherwise, which under the general laws, it has the authority to do. But as far as this board is concerned, it's on a perpetual basis, setting the rate at 70%, 30% going forward for the entire class of individuals who retired prior to 2004. That includes currently 282 people, and about, when they get to Medicare, another 30 or 40 or so who will migrate into that same plan. And if they've retired before 2004 to repeat, and they have to stay on an individual or a family plan, they will pay 30% of that. The town will pay the other 70%. So that's permanent, as permanent can be under the law. The law allows the board and the town to set the rates. It gives it the discretion to set these rates. This board is saying that instead of being at 50-50, that class of people will be at 70% and 30%. The remaining people will be at a 50-50 rate split. Most of them will migrate into a 50-50 rate split for Medicare, which, as I mentioned, cost about $180 a month at 50%, 50%. So all new retirees coming into the system from active to retired status will pay 50%, 50%.
Yes, Mr. Frangillo?
And I would just like to make it clear that anybody that is not on Medicare and won't be on Medicare will be paying $11,000 a year for their health insurance and co-pays and deductibles. And I think Winchester is going against the grain of the whole state, because I've looked at the GIC just for an example, because they were up there, and out of the 50 cities and towns and school districts on it, I think, I'm almost positive, 49 of them treat their non-Medicare employees the same as the active employee, and I think the rest of the state follows that suit.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. The next question.
June, if we couldn't have Katie explain where in her survey it shows that towns are in terms of retiree rates?
All right.
I mean, again, and I mentioned this in my opening remarks, communities are really all over the map in terms of what they pay for retiree plans. The point was made earlier with communities over 500 people, and that's right. So we do tend to see that larger communities do tend to pay a higher percentage, and smaller communities are the ones that are closer to the 50-50. But that's changing, and again, there's no sort of way to know where communities are going to migrate. But we have a summary of the MMA survey that was sent out, and that'll be available in the materials that follow, so you can see on there where different communities are. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a sort of a standard across the state that communities pay the same for their pre-Medicare retirees as they do their actives. Remember, those pre-Medicare retirees, that's generally your 55 to 65-year-olds, are by far the most expensive group of people to insure. So that is one place where communities are making the change in terms of the percentage contribution rate. But the results from the survey will be available.
And just to address John's
I'm going to cut
individual
you off
concern,
and go on.
I think it's an important point, June, because,
Yes, but you've spoken
John is
more than
maintaining
once on
that
this
some
subject
employees will
already.
have to pay $11,000.
Nobody cuts him off.
There may be other changes that can be made to the plan that will be made that will reduce costs, but we can't customize a plan for 530 odd employees, but I think some of the concerns that he has raised will be addressed as part of the mitigation plan as well.
All right, Mr. Frangelo,
Yes,
I'm going to ask you a question. Get back to the other subject if you insist. Is it true that unions can bargain for the retiree benefits for their current employees who are members, but they do not represent employees once they have retired? Because unions have a legal obligation to represent current employees and not retirees, and there may be a conflict of interest between the two groups. Aren't the retirees left unrepresented and dependent on the town to look after their interests? Would you comment on that? And then you can add whatever you want on the last subject.
Well, the town unions do not represent nor bargain for retirees. Retirees have no union. They're dependent on the town to look after their interest. And the selectmen voted to raise premium rates for all retirees. The union presidents were very worried about what was happening to their former colleagues. So they asked to meet with the Board of Selectmen to express their concerns about the impact this change would have on the retirees, and then there was no meeting ever held.
I'd like to ask Sean to comment on what retirees can do to have an impact on town decisions and to stand up for their rights with the town.
Thank you. Well, forums such as this are an excellent first start. So again, thank you very much for putting this together, and thank you for the retirees that are in attendance or watching at home. But the whole genesis of our association that, again, was founded back in 1968 was to give retirees a voice. In fact, that's our motto, the voice of the retired public employee, because they do not have collective bargaining rights. Once someone retires from public service, whether they were a teacher or a firefighter, a DPW worker, school custodian, those unions are no longer representing them at the collective bargaining table. They're at the will of the political leadership and the town administrator. So it's our job to try to help bring that together. And thankfully, over the last decade or so, we've been successful in creating some laws that a number of communities have utilized that do give retirees a voice at the table. And in fact, to give you two examples of communities very close by that I think are very well run, Arlington and Lexington, both of them have used two different laws that we were able to put on the books over the last 5 or 6 years that have brought retirees to the table, along with representatives of the active unions and the town management, to sit down and collectively, in a collaborative manner, find a way to save money and get their arms around this OPEB liability that's hanging out there. In the case of Arlington, the decision was made to join the Group Insurance Commission. In the first year alone, Arlington taxpayers saved $3.7 million by joining the GIC, and they put $1.6 million of that into a mitigation fund. In the case of Lexington, that also joined the GIC, they saved $4.4 million in the first year alone, again, through the collective process of sitting down as a coalition with retirees and active employees together to find a solution to these common problems. And believe me, not everyone's happy at the end of the day, but they're satisfied that they were able to work together as a group to come up with something that made sense and that was workable for everybody, and we hope that that will end up being the case here in Winchester.
I want to thank you for answering all of the questions and congratulate you on the fact that you actually succeeded in answering 3 of the questions I had written down but didn't actually mention. I'm going to ask one more question of each group before we get into our final statements at the end. So the question is, given that this is a problem many decades in the making and with many decades to be addressed, how should the costs be distributed between current town employees, town retirees, and town residents? I will start with the town members.
Well, I think one of the things, this is more of a personal opinion and an observation of someone who's been in the business of municipal government for 20 years, is that the state legislature will have to step up and require that, very much like a pension fund, this liability is going to have to be funded over the course of an employee's career. And deductions will have to be made and perhaps matched by the town in an effort to get everybody being every municipality on a schedule that doesn't swamp their annual ability to be able to construct a budget and pay its ongoing bills. But without that kind of relief and authority from the state legislature, then I think every community, and Winchester is just the first, these kinds of forums, I would predict, are going to be held across the Commonwealth as each town wrestles with its ability to be able to deal with this issue, but without some very, very particularized and targeted activity from the state, then every town finds itself out on its own trying to solve this problem by the way we're trying to address it here tonight.
So I'd like to say that current and future town residents will be paying down this large, roughly $60 million liability over the next 30 years, many of them for services they did not receive. Current employees will only receive 50-50. And they will also need to accept lower raises in order to fund the increasing pressure from increasing retiree expenses. And then retirees will also have to share some of it in accepting lower contributions from the town.
And for the town retirees?
I think the way in which the problem should be addressed and the burden apportioned should be the way in which it's been taking place in the last few weeks, and that's through a collective discussion between the town and the retirees. The retirees keeping in mind, of course, that they need to be mindful of the realities of the town's fiscal situations and its limits, and the town keeping in mind the promises that it has made to its retirees and the obligations that it has to keep. I think something that Ms. Cluley said is instructive, and that is that the current and future residents of the town will be paying for something that they never received the benefit of, the services of the people who are in the audience tonight and who are the retirees. I don't think that's correct at all, because I think it's only correct if you think that the service that those people provided ended when their employment ended, but it did not. The service that they provided created a legacy and a tradition of the type of community we are. A community which provides a first-rate education. That education and the value of it does not end when you leave the town or your teacher retires. That's something that each of us carry with it, and it's a mark that the town carries with it. The town's reputation is nothing but the product of those who have served the town, and that's something that we all benefit from every day.
Thank you. And now each group and our two experts are each going to have 5 minutes to summarize what they've said tonight and send you away with an idea of what you can do and how to follow up from tonight's forum. I'm going to start with the expert from the MMA, Katie McCrew.
Sure. Can I just stay right here, June? Is that okay?
Yes, you may.
So,
5 minutes.
sure. Thank you. So I want to again thank the League so much for having this event tonight. And I think your town manager is right that Winchester's on the cutting edge in terms of having events like this. There have certainly been a few, but I think these are going to happen widespread across the state as people continue to talk about this other post-employment benefit liability. So I just want to leave you with 2 things tonight that are on my mind throughout this conversation. The first one is the need for real reform, and Richard mentioned this, but real reform that's going to come from the state legislature that doesn't tie your hands even more as municipal officials in terms of being able to control this cost. And I liken this conversation tonight that's really just getting started on OPEB to municipal health insurance reform, which is a process that your community went through, similar to the process that Sean talked about that Arlington and Lexington went through when they went to the Group Insurance Commission. There was a crisis point when we got to municipal health insurance reform. And some of you may recall there was a report that came out a couple years ago. It was a joint report between the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation and the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education that said every single dollar of Chapter 70 funding, which is the funding that comes from the state to cities and towns to pay for education, was going to health insurance for teachers. Every dollar of it. And that was the point where the state legislature said, we need to do something about that. We need to change the dynamic so public employees are still getting excellent benefits, but it's not coming at the cost of adding more teachers to the classroom or technology to the classroom. So I don't think we're there yet on OPEB. I think we may be there at a crisis point. I don't think we're there yet in terms of the public discourse, and that's why events like this are so important. So I encourage everyone to think about that. Think about the 3-legged stool that we talked about earlier in terms of what can you do locally in terms of benefit changes, what needs to happen at the state level in terms of benefit changes, and then the pre-funding. And lastly, I want to just share with you the theme that we think about at the Mass Municipal Association when we think about these benefits, which is sustainability. And that was a theme that was talked about a lot throughout the commission process that Sean talked about earlier. And when we think about sustainability, first and foremost, we think about the sustainability of this benefit for generations to come. The interesting thing about this conversation in Massachusetts that's very different in other states is nobody is talking about getting rid of benefits for retirees. It's just not on the table. It's not a conversation that people are having. I sit with municipal officials all day long, and I've never heard a single municipal official say that. And in other parts of the country, that's probably very much the conversation that's happening. So how do we make sure this benefit is sustainable for generations to come? Secondly, how do we make sure that municipal services are sustainable in light of all of the budget restraints on cities and towns? And lastly, how do we make sure that money is there for sustainability of jobs for current employees? Because that's important too when we think about this. For every retiree's benefit that you're paying for, you're also paying the benefit for an active employee that's now filling that position. And really that's the job of local government, is to employ people to provide services in their town. So the theme that I think about, and I won't even take my whole 5 minutes, is just sustainability of these benefits. So again, thank you for letting the MMA participate in this event.
And now I'll call on Sean Duhamel from the Retired State, County, and Municipal Employees Association.
Thank you very much once again for the opportunity to be here this evening, and thank you to my fellow panelists for sharing in this discussion. I deeply appreciate the League taking an interest in this, and I agree with Katie that it's my hope and our association's hope that forums such as this can take place across the Commonwealth. It gives us an opportunity to tell our side of the story, dispel some of the misinformation that's been out there, and there, in our opinion, the overreaction to some of the reports that have come out. That, again, yes, these benefits are expensive, and yes, these are big liabilities that need to be paid off over the next 30 years. It's nothing that has to take place tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now, and we absolutely need a plan in order to do it. It's important to everyone in this audience, and certainly all of our members across the state, that they have a sustainable benefit going forward, not just for the current generation of retirees, but for all future generations to come. You know, certainly my generation wants it available to us, when I finally get to, if I'm lucky enough to get to retirement age. And there are ways to do that. As I mentioned before, there are a number of tools that our association and the MMA and the other organizations across the state have been engaged in creating. Those tools exist right now, and unfortunately, until now, and there's no going back, I agree with the town manager on that point, but those tools were not utilized here in Winchester in the past to the way that they have been used in other communities that have achieved a great deal more savings by using some of those tools. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Not every community should be in the GIC. Not every community should be on their own in terms of running their health insurance plan. It's something that needs to be analyzed at the local level. The other thing that's taking place across Massachusetts and really around the country is the bigger issue of healthcare reform. Every night on the news we hear about Obamacare and what that's going to mean one way or the other going forward. Well, the truth of the matter is that none of us know exactly what that's going to mean. It's a work in progress. More importantly, here in Massachusetts, there are a number of new reforms that the legislature has passed in recent years. One of them is healthcare cost containment. The whole notion is the Commonwealth being the catalyst for the insurance providers, the hospitals, the doctors, all of the healthcare providers in Massachusetts, of working together on their own to organically lower the cost of healthcare. Because the problem that we have isn't who's paying for what. It's not that the retirees aren't paying enough. It's not that the town of Winchester or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the town of Hanover, where I'm from, aren't paying enough. It's that the prices, the bills are too expensive in the first place. That's the root of the problem. That's what we need to get at as a society, rather than simply shifting who's paying from what pot of money. That's not going to solve the problem. But these things take a little bit of time. We're heading in the right direction. The inflation at the state level right now for the GIC, and we're hearing the same thing from a number of communities around Massachusetts, is around 1 to 2% for the coming fiscal year. That's a great step in the right direction. So things are happening. These costs are being lowered organically, and we don't need to engage in a race to the bottom like it's taken place in the private sector over the last 20 years, where no one at the end of the day has any health care coverage. That's not the answer to our problems. It's not the answer to the private sector problems, and it's certainly not the answer to the public sector problems. We need to come together, sit down at the table, and work these things out in an equitable and fair manner. But again, I want to thank you for the time.
And now for the closing remarks from the town officials, Selectman Forrest Fontana, Finance Committee Member Patty Cluley, and Town Manager Richard Howard.
Do you want to go first? I'll go first. I'll go first.
You go first and I'll go.
Okay. Allowing the OPEB liability to continue to grow is unwise and unfair to future generations. On Monday evening, the town manager recommended delaying discussions about funding the annual required contribution until after the next actuarial study is completed in in FY16. The Finance Committee remains committed to funding the ARC by FY16 and requests that these conversations take place now before leaders are distracted by other pressing matters. We appreciate the effort the Board of Selectmen has taken to understand the issues surrounding this complex topic and support their goal of mitigation. But I'd like to reiterate that the Board of Selectmen is not authorized to make the change to 70/30, as the voters have never approved Chapter 32B, Section 9E, which would have allowed a greater than 50% contribution to a retiree indemnity plan. We spent a lot of time talking about what other communities do, but it's important to note that that depends on the initiatives that have been voted on their local ballots. Moving to an across-the-board 50-50 cost share for retirees, supported by means testing mitigation payments, is the appropriate way to provide relief.
June, I want to thank you for hosting this, because this is an important forum, and you have so much patience, because I know we were all trying to add to the conversation. I think all for the right reason, which is we thought we had points that people needed to hear. We had information that we thought the retirees needed to know. We had information that the residents needed to know. We had an obligation that we wanted to fulfill, and we did it because I think everybody up here honestly really cares, but we do disagree. But I thank you very much for that. And it's a difficult forum only because, many of these issues we've been talking about for years. Matter of fact, before I was a selectman, and I'm in my second term, selectman, to my right, my left down there, our future town moderator, Peter Haley, came up with an incredibly creative way to deal with our healthcare problems. And we've been attacking healthcare for the last 6 years in this town. It's disappointing. I appreciate Sean coming, but everything he's talked about didn't even apply. Matter of fact, I'm not sure he did his research on our town. Our town went to a lookalike GIC plan. The savings he talked about for Arlington and Lexington, which you complimented on, there's nothing to do with OPEB. It has to do with sort of the health care in general. We've already actually initiated those changes that were pioneered by Richard Howard when he came in. So we've already taken a lot of those savings. Matter of fact, our board made a point that we would never approach this topic of the retiree before we worked on every other lever that we could do. So we worked on expense cuts. We worked on the health care changes. We talked about and went to it for an operating override. So this was actually one of the last initiatives, not the first, and it's one of many. So the idea, the language, what bothers me tonight is this language that it was, overnight and it's on the back of the retirees. It couldn't be anything from the truth. Our board has cared about this issue and chairmanships that have preceded this one. Let me give you a few important numbers, though, that are important, and I might need a minute, more than 2 minutes. We talked about healthcare. That's growing. That was growing at north of 15%. On a $10 million budget, that's $1 million. We talked about the OPEB contribution. As Peter Haley indicated, that would eat up almost our entire tax base growth. The school budget grows at 3%, 4%, 5%. That's over $1 million. So as a board, we have to deal with school services, capital projects, public safety, collective bargaining, which we're in the middle of right now, flood mitigation, town reserves. We have lots of constituents we have to balance. We care about the retirees, but we also care about the residents in general, of which they are, many of them, residents. So we're looking in the broader context. So there's a compassion and empathy that we have, but we also think of it in a total context. I guess the last thing I would just sort of sum up was, I want people to understand this is not the end of the dialogue. Board meets almost every Monday night. We continually have a context. We have a town meeting. So the idea that this topic won't be discussed, the idea that the board is not open or Rich is not open. I mean, when Richard has come in, he has had so many meetings with the constituents of this town. So I really want people to understand that the perception that's left here is that we weren't listening or we won't listen, we don't care. Totally inaccurate. We care about them. We want to listen. We'll do our best. Look, we're all public volunteers on the board. We receive no compensation. This is not our full-time profession. Many of us are taking time away from our families and our children, but we do it because we think it's the right thing we do and we care about this community. This community is a leading community, not a following community. If we followed all these peer statistics that Sean and others talk about, we'd be following these communities down the cliff. Okay? The state and the federal government have lots of issues they deal with. They do means-based testing, they do forms testing, but we were proposing that because of equality. I need 2 more minutes, please. So the board...
I'm sorry.
No, but it's important to understand the board always looked at equality.
We can't really give you
Okay.
extra minutes when we're trying to limit the others. We'll end with the 3 representatives of the retirees, John Franchillo, Winchester fireman and president of Firefighters Local 1564, Janice Dolan, retired Winchester teacher, and Peter Haley, former selectman and school committee member.
I just want to say one thing, that Winchester is a great town, has many championships. I know, I've lived here my whole life, but we don't always have to be number one or the first in everything that is done in the state. And one more thing I wanted to go back to, when the town manager mentioned some of the things that you might see up on the board, might be a little going one way or another. The Mass Municipal has something up there to take a look at. You did a survey of 290 cities and towns responding back. I noticed one thing, that it said that only 6 towns grandfathered their retirees. Well, I did a study of 50 that were in the GIC, and out of those 50, 22 of them grandfathered their retirees. So things aren't always what they seem. The town manager is right on that one. I'm done speaking. I'll let Peter take over now.
Thanks to the League of Women Voters and everyone who's participated tonight. I think that it's a difficult conversation for many. I think too often we have discussions about financial accounting and OPEB liabilities and fiscal issues that are good for the town or not good for the town, but we forget that the discussion is very real for the people who are concerned not about liabilities that are 60 million or 100 million, but what their liabilities are going to be each month. And for those people, it's a very personal decision, and I think it's important that we keep that in mind. I think the other difficulty as well, though, are those who serve the town. This is not a conversation where Mr. Howard or Mr. Fontana or Ms. Cluley have anything to gain personally at all. They volunteer their time to try to make the best decisions for the town. They spend a tremendous amount of time at it, and they have done so over the past few months repeatedly to try to arrive at what I think will be a very strong solution for the town, for the retirees and the town at the same time, and they have made extraordinary efforts to do so, and they deserve every credit for doing so. I think there are two things that have always been true of the town of Winchester. One is its reputation for fiscal probity and fiscal solvency. We carry around the fact that we have a AAA bond rating, and we're very proud of that fact. We're proud of the way that we conduct ourselves financially and economically, as well we should be, and it's a tradition that we should work to carry on. But the other thing that's always been true about Winchester is that we have been a place which is primarily concerned with raising the children in our community and instilling in them two things. One, an education, a knowledge about the things that they need to know about the world. But the other, and more important always to us, is instilling in them the type of character that we wish them to carry on to the communities that they will live in as adults. The way they conduct themselves as adults, the way they deal with other people, their reputation for integrity and honesty. And it is that character, that quality, which is not just as important as the economic quality, but more important. And I think it's that quality that the town should be guided by when it comes to make the decisions about how it treats those who have served the town. If we are guided by that, the way that we treat others, the way that we want to be known, I think that the town will arrive at the correct decision, and I think it's well on its way to doing so. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Do you want to yield your time to?
I yield. I yield.
All right, go ahead.
She can yield to you, Chair.
Yeah, they get more time.
Before we close, just a few words of thanks. I'm Rosemary Pye, the co-chair of this program, along with Marilyn Mullane. We want to thank our moderator, June Michaels, and all of our speakers. They've helped clarify a complex and important topic. Thanks to all of you who have attended to become better informed on this subject. Thanks to WinCam for filming this program, so your friends who are not able to attend tonight can see it rebroadcast several times on Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 37, and on demand on the WinCam station. You'll also be able to find the program at the League of Women Voters website, as will electronic versions of the handouts that are going to be on electronically. We repeat that the League takes no position on OPEB liability and health insurance premiums for Winchester Town retirees. We wanted a discussion by the experts to allow you to make up your own mind and present your views to your elected officials. You can call or write your representatives. As they've suggested, attend their meetings of the Board of Selectmen and the town meeting and vote in the town election coming up on April 1st. If you want to hear more want to have more such programs and encourage informed civic participation in Winchester, join the League of Women Voters, which is open to men as well as women. Membership information is available right outside the auditorium. So let's end the night with a big round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well.
Hopefully someday we can have you at every